she slept with the king. And that made her something the queen could never be, because the royal marriage was never about love or desire. That was politics, a treaty, an alliance signed in a cathedral. We tell ourselves his mistress was the opposite, love and passion, the one he actually chose. But was it? In France, the woman in the king's bed was not a lover. She was an institution. Start with the marriage, because the marriage is what made the mistress necessary. A king of France did not choose his wife. The queen was far too important to be left to his own liking. She was picked by his advisers, sometimes with no real say from him at all, because she was not there to be loved. She was there to seal a treaty. A royal marriage joined two countries, and the woman at the centre of it was a living alliance, foreign-born, sent from another crown, carrying another country's interests into the heart of France. Her first duty was to produce an heir. Her second was to be pious, dignified, and above reproach. What she could never be was the one person in the kingdom the king trusted without reservation, because her loyalties pointed somewhere else, and everyone knew it. So beside the throne there was a space, not an emptiness of affection only, but of counsel, a king surrounded by ministers who wanted things, and a wife who belonged half to a foreign court, had no one at his side who was wholly his. And into that space, again and again, stepped another woman. Kings everywhere kept mistresses. That was nothing new, and nothing French. England had them, and some grew powerful. Alice Perrers, Jane Shore. But they lived in the half-light, tolerated, never named. France did something no other kingdom did. It brought the mistress into the open and gave her a place in the order of things. Not a secret indulgence, but a recognized role, with its own expectations, its own standing at court, and a political weight that could rival the king's closest advisers. And the strange logic that made it possible ran underneath everything. A woman, in the law of the age, was a lesser thing than a man. She could inherit less, rule less, own less, and, under the Salic law that governed the French crown, never contend with a king for his throne, nor pass a claim to it through her children. But that same age granted her something with the other hand. In wit, in judgment, in competence, she was held to be a man's equal. Put those two beliefs together, and you arrive at a conclusion the French court reached and no one else did, that the safest confidant a king could have was exactly such a woman. Clever enough to advise him, and barred by her sex from ever using that closeness to take what was his. The queen was a foreigner. The minister was an ambition. The mistress, and the mistress alone, could be both trusted and controlled. None of it was ever written into law. There was no letter of appointment, no salary set down in the household accounts, no office anyone could point to on paper. And yet everyone at court knew exactly when a woman held the place, because the moment she did, the whole machinery of Versailles rearranged itself around her. It began with the things that could be seen. She was given apartments among the finest in the palace, placed close to the king. If she had no rank of her own, the king bought her one, because the court could not receive a commoner. So a title was found, an estate purchased, a coat of arms granted, and a woman born outside the nobility walked into Versailles a marquise. She was presented formally, in front of the court, in front of the queen. What had begun in a bedchamber was made in the space of a season into a fixture of the state. And then came the real power, which had nothing to do with the bedchamber at all. The mistress was the one person always near the king, and beholden to no one but him. So she became the road to him. A minister who wanted a decision, a family that wanted a favour, a soldier who wanted a command. the surest way to the king ran through her rooms. She placed her friends and unmade her enemies. She had a hand in who was given regiments and who was given ministries. When the court wanted something from the king, it learned to want it through her first. The clearest measure of what she had become came from outside France entirely. When the court of Austria opened negotiations with Louis XV, it did not work only through his ministers. It chose the Marquise de Pompadour as its channel to the king, a foreign power treating the royal mistress as the surest route to the crown of France. A woman with no office and no legal power was handling the business of nations from a set of rooms above the king's own. That was the paradox at the centre of the whole arrangement. The less official her power was, the more real it became. The place outlived every woman who filled it, and to see what it became, you have to watch it pass from one to the next, across 200 years and the reigns of 4 kings. Though the tradition is held to begin earlier, with figures like Agnès Sorel, mistress to Charles VII in the 15th century, and remembered as the first officially recognized royal mistress of France, it found its fullest early form in Diane de Poitiers, mistress to Henri II in the middle of the 16th century. She was no passing fancy. She co-signed the king's official letters in a single hand that fused their names, Henri Diane. She was given charge of the crown jewels of France, and she was counted among the most trusted advisers of the reign, courted by anyone who needed the king's ear. The role she shaped set the pattern, the mistress not as a diversion, but as a fixture of government. It passed in the next century to the mistresses of Louis XIV, and above all to the Marquise de Montespan, who held the place at the height of the Sun King's power and turned it into a seat of patronage. A hand in appointments, in diplomacy, in the vast cultural machine of Versailles itself. By now, the position was so established that ambassadors and courtiers treated the reigning mistress as a power in her own right, to be flattered, bribed, and reckoned with like any minister of the crown. Its most complete expression came with the Marquise de Pompadour, mistress to Louis XV from 1745, until her death in 1764. A commoner raised to a marquisate to make her fit for court, she went far beyond the bedchamber to become the king's chief political confidant, advising on the appointment of ministers and generals, steering France through the alliances that led into the 7 Years' War, and receiving foreign envoys who came to her because they knew hers was the surest voice into the king. For 19 years she was, in all but name, one of the most powerful figures in France. And then it passed one last time to Jeanne Bécu, Madame du Barry. A woman from the very bottom of society, she was married off to a count to give her the rank the position required, and moved into Versailles as the king's acknowledged mistress. She used her place to push her allies into high office, reaching even into the running of foreign affairs. She was the last woman to hold the role in its full glory, and when Louis XV died in 1774, her power died with him in an instant, the whole edifice of it resting, as it always had, on the life of a single man. The role had always rested on a single life, the king's. When Louis XV died in 1774, Madame du Barry was gone from court within a day, her power vanishing the instant the man it depended on stopped breathing. But that was only the fall of one woman. The fall of the whole institution came from something larger, and it came fast. The new king, Louis XVI, took no official mistress. For the first time in generations, there was no maîtresse-en-titre at the French court, and the absence turned out to matter more than anyone expected. For 3 centuries, the mistress had drawn the court's fascination and the people's resentment onto herself. She was the one blamed when money ran short or wars went badly. the lightning rod that stood between the crown and the anger of France. Now she was gone, and there was no one in that place. The full weight of the hatred fell instead on the one woman left at the king's side, the Queen. And the Queen was everything the old fear had always warned against: a foreigner, an Austrian, married to France by treaty, her loyalties suspect from the day she arrived. Marie Antoinette became the focus of every rumour of excess and betrayal. Madame Deficit, the she-wolf bankrupting the nation. The role that might have absorbed some of that fury no longer existed. When the revolution came in 1789, it came for the whole edifice of the court, and it did not distinguish between the kinds of women who had lived there. It made that plain at the end. Marie Antoinette, the Queen, went to the guillotine on the 16th of October, 1793. Jeanne Bécu, Madame du Barry, the last woman to hold the great position, dragged back into the story one final time, went to the same blade less than 2 months later, on the 8th of December. The wife and the mistress, the two halves of the strange arrangement France had built and lived by for 300 years, ended within weeks of each other, under the same machine. The court that had created the position was gone, and the position went with it. No king of France would ever appoint another. She had been the most powerful woman in France, and never the Queen, and that was the whole point of her. France had built one thing no other kingdom dared: a place at the centre of power for a woman clever enough to serve the king, and barred forever from becoming him. Not a lover kept in the dark, but an institution kept in the open. It rested on nothing but the king himself, no law, no office, no ground of its own, and so, when the throne came down, she came down with it. The wife and the mistress went to the same blade, within weeks of each other, and the strange second seat beside the throne was never built again. She was never a lover. She was an institution, and an institution is only ever as alive as the thing it serves.